And for those who enjoy this channel and would love to support us financially, please feel free to hit that donate link. We'd greatly appreciate it. God bless.
Okay, guys, we are live tonight on Standing for Truth, and we got a really, really exciting one for you tonight. We can already tell in the chat we've had people waiting for over an hour, so this is going to be one to remember. We've got intelligent design versus abiogenesis. We have Otangelo versus Snake was right. So both these gentlemen are no strangers to debates. They've had plenty. Which is yet another reason why we're so excited. I've also got, I'm blessed today with Brother Smokey as co-moderator, who's going to help me out in the chats. Smokey, thanks for being here.
Pleasure, sir. Absolutely. Anytime.
Awesome. I appreciate it. We've had a busy week of debates. I think we've had debates every single day almost. So for those who haven't seen some of the really, really good debates we've had this week, go check the playlist to see those. Yesterday we had Smokey here who debated Calvinism. Definitely a must watch. A lot of good feedback there. Tomorrow is the debate of all debates. We've got Brother John Maddox and Godless Engineer, who are finally going to battle it out. So we're really excited for that one. And Monday, our amazing producer himself, Praise I Am That I Am, is taking on Snake Was Right. So Snake, you're going to be busy in the next couple of days on, correct me if I'm wrong, secular morality versus biblical morality.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, well, guys, stay tuned for that. And we're working on a couple interviews as well that we are close to confirming. I'll announce those when they are officially confirmed. So structure for tonight, as usual, semi-formal, semi-informal. We're going to start with some 12-minute openings, up to 12-minute openings. Whatever the debaters don't use, we'll just toss it into the discussion portion. After the openings, we go into discussion, question and answer. I think we're going to have a big audience tonight, so make sure you're tagging Smokey. He'll save all the questions. We'll ask the super chats first. We'll get to as many questions as we can. So make sure you're tagging Smokey and we'll be good to go. And yeah, enough for me. Let's break the ice. Let's hand it over to the debaters to kind of just go over a little bit about them. If they want to plug in their channels, tell us what they're doing. Why don't we start with Snake? Snake, thanks for being here tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So the usual, I basically do videos about skepticism about pretty much any topic. So I kind of built a base on kind of creationist debates, a little bit of, that gets my most views on a regular basis. But my best views were totally unrelated, is about whether you can stick a sword on your back. I've done other debates about skepticism of communism, things like that. I've started to dip my toes more into the political realm, but I'm hoping to kind of keep that creationist debates going too, because that's what people seem to like.
I think you're right. Those seem to be the best viewed debates on any of the major debate channels. So if you like what you're hearing from Snake here, like I said, he's no stranger to this channel. Go check out his channel, like, subscribe, look at the videos. And let's move over to Otangelo. Otangelo, let's hear from you. How's everything going? I know you got a new debate channel you just set up as well. So why don't you give us a little bit of information about you?
Yes, good evening, good night, everyone. I have set up a new YouTube channel. The name is The Goat Talk, and I have linked the address, and you can put it on the chat so everyone can access it. And I am an evangelical Christian for 36 years, and it was always my focus to debate unbelievers, bring the gospel, and be an apologetics guy. So that's basically it.
Awesome.
And,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and my introduction, I have linked to it, so you can put it on the chat too, so people can open the link and follow my introduction and read it together with me.
Okay, well, thank you for that introduction, Otangelo. Go check out his main channel as well as his debate channel. He just had a couple of really good debates on there as well, so be sure to like, subscribe, and check those out. Thanks so much, gentlemen, for the introductions. Why don't we jump right into the opening statements? Up to 12 minutes. My apologies. Did we agree on who would start it off?
No.
Anybody want to?
Yeah, I can start, no problem.
Okay. I appreciate that, Otangelo. No rush. Whenever you're comfortable, you just give us the A-OK, and I'll start the timer. I'll set it for 12 minutes.
Yeah, just let me link here to my Okay, here we go. Can everyone see it?
I just see a black screen.
Yeah, me too. I don't know what is happening.
Yeah, it's just a black screen for me too. So make sure the fourth button, share screen. Make sure, Otangelo, you click the middle thing again, and then click the screen. So there's kind of a two-step process there.
It is not appearing. I don't know what is happening.
Did you, if you have your opening written or if you have your opening pre-prepared and the screen share doesn't work, not to worry if you want to just go without the screen share.
I could try to share it on my side. Do we want to try to do that?
I will try to put it up on Firefox, and then I think I should be able to share it. I don't know why it doesn't show up on Chrome. So, or if it takes a little while, my internet is not so fast. But if you want to put it up, that's okay too. Whatever.
Yeah, whatever you guys think is best. It should work.
I have it pulled up. So, I mean, I have it pulled up right now. I mean, I could just share the screen. It's up to you guys. And I mean, he can tell me to scroll down or whatever he wants me to click on. It's up to you guys if you want to do it that way.
I'm totally fine with that. It would be up to Otangelo. Would you like Smokey to share it and then you give him kind of direction as to when he needs to scroll down?
Yeah, it doesn't have to scroll down. It's just one page. So
okay, here we go.
Okay, it appeared, so I think it should be able now. I should.
Okay, you want to give it a shot?
Yeah, I'll try now.
I think that's my screen. That's my screen.
Yeah, it doesn't work. So you put it up, please.
Okay. All right. Hold on one sec. Okay. Yep. All right. There we go. Okay.
Okay, can I start?
Yeah, we see it.
Whenever you're ready, yep. Go ahead, Otangelo, and I'll start your timer.
Okay. In the origin of life community, there are two hypotheses of how life came to be. The metabolism first and the RNA world hypothesis. Both are plagued with problems. Let's give a closer look at the RNA world. How to get RNA and DNA on the early Earth, and how to get information to give life the first go are major unsolved problems. The synthesis of RNA and DNA in prebiotic conditions has never been demonstrated in the laboratory. I have listed 37 different unsolved issues in regards of RNA synthesis. No naturalistic explanations exist despite decades of attempts to solve the riddle. There is no evidence that the elements in special carbon and nitrogen in the usable form were extant on the early Earth to make the basic building blocks of life, including RNA and DNA. Catalysis on clay to form polymerization of RNA strands is just wishful thinking. The primary incentive behind the theory of self-replicating systems that Manfred Eigen outlined was to develop a simple model explaining the origin of biological information and hence of life itself. Eigen's theory reveals the existence of the fundamental limit on the fidelity of replication, called the Eigen threshold. The very origin of the first organisms presents at least an appearance of a paradox, because a certain minimum level of complexity is required to make self-replicating possible at all. High-fidelity replication requires additional functionalities that need even more information to be encoded. Hence, the dramatic paradox of the origin of life is that to attain the minimum complexity required for a biological system to start, a system of a far greater complexity appears to be required. How such a system could emerge is an unsolved puzzle. The origin of life, or to be more precise, the origin of the first replicator systems and the origin of translation remains a huge enigma. And progress in solving these problems has been very modest. In the case of translation, nearly negligible.
We just got a black screen, guys, by the way, just to let you know, SFT, we have a black screen on YouTube. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, I just noticed that too. Praise, brother, do you know what's going on?
Can I continue?
Yeah, I just...
It's back.
Okay, all right.
Back? Okay. The next huge step would be to go from short polypeptide RNA to long, stable DNA chains. The transition from RNA to DNA is the next overwhelmingly huge problem. Highly complex nanomachines are required to synthesize DNA from RNA. Amongst them, hypercomplex enzymes like ribonucleotide reductase proteins. Of course, to make those, DNA is required, which turns the riddle a catch-22 problem. What came first, DNA or the machines that make DNA? The next problem would be to form the genetic code, consistent of 64 triplet codons, and the assignment of the meaning of each codon to one of the 20 amino acids used to make proteins. That is the genetic cipher or the translation code. Assigning a meaning of one symbol to something else is always based on the mind. There is no viable alternative explanation. One science paper has called the origin of the genetic code the universal enigma. On top of that, the genetic code is nearly optimal amongst 1 million alternative codes, which are less robust. How to explain that? Furthermore, an overlapping language has been found in the genetic code. Now, let's suppose we had RNA, DNA, polymerization, and the genetic code. We can equate it to an information storing hard disk, but of far higher sophistication than anything devised by man. Even Richard Dawkins had to admit in The Blind Watchmaker, there is enough information capacity in a single human cell to store the Encyclopedia Britannica, all 30 volumes of it, 3 or 4 times over. Next. Where did the information come from to make the first living organism? One of the simplest free-living bacteria, Pelagibacter ubique, it has complete biosynthetic pathways for all 20 amino acids. These organisms get by with about 1,300 genes and 1.3 million base pairs and code for about 1,300 proteins. If a chain could link up, what is the probability that the code letters would line up to confer instructional complex codified information to make this bacteria? The chances to get the sequence randomly would be 4 to the 1.2 million or 10 to the 722,000. And there are 10 to the 88 atoms in the universe. Consider that we cannot explain its origin through evolution, because evolution depends on DNA replication, which origin we try to elucidate. But we have not yet dealt with the origin of the machines that encode, send, decode the information. That is the transcription and translation machinery necessary to express the genetic information to make proteins. Where did that machinery come from? Of course, genetic information is required to specify the amino acid chains that make these proteins. To make proteins and direct and insert them to the right place where they're needed. At least 25 extremely complex biosynthesis and production line-like manufacturing steps are required. Each step requires molecular machines composed of numerous subunits and cofactors, which require the very own processing procedure described to make them, which makes its origin an irreducible catch-22 problem. To exemplify this, let's take one of those macromolecules, the ribosome. The origin of the translation system is arguably the central and the hardest problem in the study of the origin of life, and one of the hardest in all evolutionary biology. The design of the translation system in even the simplest modern cells is extremely complex. At the heart of the system is the ribosome, a large complex of at least 3 RNA molecules and 60 to 80 proteins arranged in precise spatial architecture and interacting with other components of the translation system in the most finely choreographed fashion. These other essential components include the complete set of tRNAs for the 20 amino acids, the set of 20 amino acid tRNA synthetases, and furthermore, about 200 scaffold and assembly proteins, and 75 cofactors are required to make the ribosome, to synthesize it. How could that have occurred, in special considering that there was no evolution at this stage? Once all this emerged, DNA replication errors had to be reduced 10 billion times by error check and repair mechanisms. All the machinery described required a protective envelope, which had to create a homeostatic environment, diminishing the calcium concentration inside of the cell 10,000 times below the external environment to permit signaling. At the same time, a signaling code would have had to be established and immediately begin to function with a common agreement between sender and receiver. Then energy supply would have been a major problem, since almost all life forms depend on the supply of glucose, which is a product of complex metabolic pathways and not readily available on the prebiotic Earth. Most proteins require active metal clusters in their reactive centers. These clusters are in most cases ultra-complex. Each cluster had to have the right atoms interconnected in the right way and get the correct three-dimensional form. They require the complex uptake of the basic materials like iron and sulfur, molybdenum, and complex biosynthesis processes after the correct assembling, the insertion in the right way and form inside the proteins. All these processes require energy in the form of ATP, not readily available, since ATP is the product of complex nanofactories like ATP synthase, which by themselves depend on a proton gradient. So the end question, how is all this better explained? By chance or by intelligent design? I go with the latter. Okay, I'm finished.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that opening statement there, Otangelo. With I think just a couple minutes to spare. So I'll toss that into either the discussion or the 2.5 minutes to spare. So we'll toss that into the discussion. Once again, guys, in the chat, make sure you're tagging Smokey with your questions, and we'll make sure we have a really solid Q&A period. So Snake, over to you. The floor is yours. You've got up to 12 minutes. Whatever you don't use, we'll put into the discussion.
All right, thanks. So I guess I'll start with the fact of the very premise of creationists, like calculations that it's too improbable for these things to have happened, are basically based on straw men of abiotic theories. So they calculate the probability of a modern protein or modern organisms, like a complete bacterium from today, and not simple life forms that the abiotic theories actually deal with. And they throw in words like randomness, which is also not abiogenesis. So currently, just about every step of abiogenesis has been demonstrated with some holes, but that doesn't really mean anything. We had some holes in how to get to the moon. That didn't mean it was impossible to get to the moon. It means that this field of study is still under review. We're still figuring things out. Basically, as Otangelo mentioned, the RNA replicase or ribosomes are kind of the biggest hole in this currently, but there's a lot of promising information about how that happens naturally and how information builds naturally. And again, just because we don't know something yet doesn't mean that it's impossible to know. So the second point is that creationists assume that there is a high number of protein with a fixed sequence required for life, when really all abiogenesis is looking for is a self-replicating genetic molecule. Well, it doesn't even have to be genetic. It itself just has to replicate other genetic molecules, and these actually exist. And they can be obtained through evolution, and they are not intelligently designed. They actually cannot intelligently design these. They can only obtain them through evolution. So functional proteins are not really fixed to a single sequence. There's a range of effective sequences and a range of effective functions within the same basic overall sequence, like maybe even up to 10% can change. And did I cut out there for a second? You guys can all still hear me?
Yeah, we hear you just fine.
Okay.
Snake. Yeah, you're fine.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right, I thought I lost you for a sec. Let's see, where was I? Basically what I'm saying is you can change a little bit of a protein and it'll still have a function, and it still might have a similar function. And so slightly different or completely different molecules can also have similar functions. So like ribozymes are not the same as modern ribosomes, and yet they have similar functions, but they're extremely different. Similar function though. The third point about improbable calculations that are straw men is that creationists tend to calculate the probability of unrelated sequential synthesis trials rather than simultaneous trials, all happening simultaneously, of course. By this, I mean that millions, if not billions, of permutations can be tried all at the same time, basically competing with each other. But creationists try to make these happen one at a time, or that's how the probability calculations are gotten to, one after another, isolated from another. And this is highly unrealistic for any chemical model. They also don't seem to account for selection bias, where some conformations will stick around better and will have 100% probability to lead to new permutations of that template. So they only look at how likely it would be for the end product to form as it is right now, rather than the probability of each step along the way. And so that throws off the numbers as well. And that's completely irrelevant to the actual theory. And creationists tend to assume that functional enzymes and ribozymes are rare, especially at random, except most molecules, if not all molecules. I mean, there's gases, but even they have functions. Most molecules do have a biochemical function. They're not all inert. And when random sequences are produced, functional enzymes have been shown to be very likely. And even if their sequences are produced at random, they have useful functions all over the board. But we can isolate functions that we're looking for as well, like what I mentioned earlier. So currently we know the probability of naturally forming monomers of nucleotides, lipids, amino acids, sugars, and other organic compounds is 1. We know it will happen. It has happened. And the same with the formation of polymers and complexes. So we don't know the probability of them coming together to form a functional cell, because we don't exactly know in how many steps or which order those steps will occur. But most of the parts are already there, and we have experiments showing the formation of cooperative complexes. Some of them are extremely cell-like, and we get closer and closer all the time. So there's absolutely no reason to think that this is impossible at this point. So the probability is likely far closer to 1 for the formation of life than the astronomically, comically large, and obviously distorted.
Oh, it looks like we did lose Snake there.
Oh,
Am I back?
Oh yeah, no, now you're back. Okay,
You're
good.
back. You're just teasing us, Snake.
Ah, great. Yeah. Okay.
Maybe go back 5 seconds.
Okay.
Start there.
I think where I was, we get closer and closer all the time. There's no reason to know that no reason to think that these things are impossible at this stage. I don't think it's been demonstrated. There are holes in the theory. That doesn't mean that it's impossible. So the probability of abiogenesis is likely far closer to 1 than the astronomically, comically large and obviously distorted calculations made by that are typically floating around in creationist communities. So we have, I'm just going to go over some of the things that we have shown. We've shown abiotic synthesis of lipids, sugars, nucleotides, and amino acids, abiotic polymerization of nucleotides and amino acids, RNA-based polymerization of nucleotides. That means basically we don't need modern ribosomes. RNA-based synthesis of nucleotides. There's synthesis and polymerization, so you have to make them and then stick them together. We can do that with RNAs. Abiotic synthesis of nucleotides, which is evidenced by sugars, nucleotides, and amino acids being found in meteorites. So that indicates that they actually are naturally occurring in natural chemistry, because unless God is creating life on meteorites, then it's very likely that these things are just forming from natural chemistry that's happening on other celestial bodies or even in space. We have RNA-based copying of RNA. We have abiotic nucleotide activation. So that goes into how they get stuck together, into how they're able to stick together into a polymer or a protein. So we also know that the Earth billions of years ago had no life, and then life, it seems, appears in the form of single cells and become more and more complex as we go through the rock layers and as time goes by. And all of those rock layers uniformly date to the same time period using different methods. Each rock layer that we can visually confirm is in the same layer. We can take water from those layers, it dates to the same time. We can take magma from those layers, it dates to the same time. And they all date to the same time based on different chemical pathways, different radioactive decay states can come to the same number. So we know that those are all reliable. We know that Earth is that old. We know that life was not on the Earth originally. And we know that life appeared and was very simple. We know it happened. We just don't know everything about how it happened. So I'm basically going to draw an analogy to a criminal case where we have pages and pages of direct physical evidence pointing directly and exclusively to a single suspect. We just don't have it on video. So, and you're saying, well, you don't have it on video, therefore you're just telling a story. You're just weaving a tale based on these disparate pieces of evidence that we have holes in it. So that would be like finding a knife at the suspect's house, the victim's DNA on it, the suspect's DNA at the crime scene and on the murder weapon, shoe prints that match the suspect at the scene of the crime, and stab wounds that match the knife. But then we're sat there saying, okay, well, we don't know which stab wound first. We don't quite know how the suspect broke into the house because there's no evidence of breaking and entering. But it's obvious that this crime occurred. So we know that it happened. We know for sure that it happened. We just don't know exactly with every single detail what happened. And we learn more every time, or all the time. And it's not very scientifically sound to conclude, therefore, a ghost did it is a better explanation. So, and if you object to that because a murderer would be an intelligent person, you can just swap out that entire analogy with something that looks exactly like an accident, and then saying, okay, well, the better explanation, since we don't know exactly how the anvil fell on the guy's head, well, the better explanation is that someone must have dropped it on his head. So that doesn't quite make sense. I guess the main contention here would be basically I don't claim that abiogenesis is a solved science. I'm basically here to refute the idea that it is impossible to have happened or that intelligent design has in any way been demonstrated. So I guess we can just jump in.
Okay, boom, right on time, 14 seconds to spare. So we're going to have a good discussion. We've got a lot of super chats and questions coming in. So Brother Smokey's a busy man. Thanks again, Smokey, for being such a blessing and a big help tonight. So guys,
Pleasure's always mine.
Thanks, man. So make sure you're tagging Smokey. And yeah, let's get right into the discussion period. Snake just ended with his opening. So maybe it's fair for Brother Otangelo if you want to address a couple points or start it off with the question. The floor is all yours, gentlemen.
Okay, Snake, I have a question for you. You find a nanofactory packed with miniature chemical processors, computing and robotics, able to self-replicate, and the blueprint upon which the factory was made. And you have no indication whatsoever who or what made that factory and the blueprint upon which that factory was made. And someone asks you, is this most likely the product of intelligence, random unguided forces, physical necessity, or you feel justified to say, oh, I have no idea, I don't know? Which of the four answers do you think would be the most appropriate one to respond to that question?
Seeing as we know what blueprints are and we know that that's the standard of what humans use to design things and that it's done in a way that humans specifically understand and it's not just encoded into a just chemical form that behaves on its own, it's only readable by human intelligences, that indicates where it comes from.
Okay, I am a machine designer, and when I have the order from my boss to make machines and a factory for a specific purpose, the first thing that I do is I sit down on the table, I think about how to solve that problem, then I will draw all the drawings with the specific information, with the sizes and the material and everything else which is required. Then these drawings will go to the factory. There, the factory workers will read these drawings, and upon that information and these instructions, they will make the machines, the production lines, and the factory exactly specified upon what they read on the blueprints. So this is an entirely intelligently driven process from the beginning to the end. And if you say, well, chance could do the same, then I would say, well, that has never been observed that it is possible. And exactly the same we see in biological cell factories, where the genome is the instructional codified complex information, which instructs how to make the molecular machines, the proteins, and then in the end, the entire cell factory. So that is an analogy, but it is also what is literally happening in biological cells. And science does not see biological cells as factories just in an analogous sense, but they understand cells as literally chemical factories which make all the products that are required, and then on top of that they self-replicate. So we have here an example of the most sophisticated cell factory which is self-replicating, and humans, they are not even close to make something so sophisticated like that. And you believe that this came by chance? How is that logical?
Because I don't believe it came from chance, and no one does. And it's not analogous at all, because life self-replicates and tends to get, well, it can get more complex. And we see from the fossil record that it did get more complex.
Well, actually, self-replication is the epitome of complexity. This is a self-defeating argument because it is not taken into consideration that self-replication is the highest complex and epitome of manufacturing advance and achievement, far from being realized by man-made factories. The fact that cells self-replicate substantiates and reinforces the inference of intelligent design gigantically.
No, it doesn't. Just because it's complex.
Well, it's not just because it's just complex. It is, there are two components here. There is instructional complex information. That's one thing. And then the cell is not, as you said, it could emerge by a gradual, stepwise manner. Science has recognized that cells, they have to come to exist all at once. And that is such an irreducible complex system. We cannot even imagine how that is. If you have just one protein that is not importing iron, you don't have a self-replicating functional cell, because iron is essential for the cofactors of proteins. And if there is not the machinery to import the iron or sulfur or molybdenum or whatever, then you do not have the material to make the cofactors, which is essential to have functional proteins, and you do not have self-replicating life.
You're talking about modern, more complex organisms, and
no,
it wouldn't all occur in the one step.
No, I disagree. There are many proteins which are life essential, and they have cofactors which use iron sulfur centers, and these proteins, they are life essential.
Like,
for example, in the carbon fixation cycle, the most simple one, which would be the Wood-Ljungdahl cycle, there is the first of 9 proteins which requires molybdenum, and molybdenum has to be imported from the outside of the cell, and it requires specific import channels on the membrane to import the molybdenum. And then the cofactors, they need to be assembled inside of the cell, and that's an extremely complex process. And if that doesn't happen, then you don't have functional proteins which have these cofactors.
For modern life.
No.
This isn't abiotic theory at all, though.
It is required in many proteins which are life essential.
For modern life. But again, we're not looking at those types of cells.
That's what we are looking like. You want to have a first living self-replicating cell, which is commonly called the last universal common ancestor. That is the threshold from non-life to life, where self-replicating...
No, it's not. No, that's just the last common ancestor. There's probably... there is a lot more life before that point. That's just the last common ancestor. That's not the first life. Not even close.
Well, the simplest free-living bacteria which we know of is, as I said in my introduction, it has a size of 1.3 million nucleotides. Most commonly, it's claimed that, for example, Mycoplasma has just about 500,000 nucleotides. But these are not free-living cells. They are living in a host, and they do not have the machinery, for example, to make amino acids. So that is not a good candidate for a first living self-replicating cell, which actually needs to have these machineries to make amino acids. Amino acids, they are not simply free-living and existing on a prebiotic Earth.
They are, actually.
Well, in the Müller-Urey experiment, they didn't synthesize 8 of the life essential amino acids, and tryptophan, for example, is the most complex amino acid, and you can look up how complex it is to make that amino acid. It's extremely complex, and it requires several metabolic pathways in the cell, and that is an amino acid which is not existing in the free living world. It's not known, and they have not been able to reproduce it in a prebiotic lab experiment.
So you think that means that it's impossible? You think that that's demonstrated?
Well, we are now 70 years trying to synthesize the basic building blocks of life, including amino acids, and that has far from being succeeded. And in my introduction, which is available to the folks there, they can link to it. And I have listed all the problems to make nucleic acids and amino acids and phospholipids and carbohydrate. And none of the 4 basic building blocks of life has been synthesized in the lab. This is a completely outstanding problem.
You think that we've learned everything we're going to learn about prebiotic chemistry?
Well, I think, Snake, that we have to use
yes
an
or no?
inference. Well, they can, in 70 years, they have tried whatever they want, and they are not coming closer, but they are going more distant from understanding how life could have come by natural
It's not
means.
more distant. The question that I asked was, do you think that we've learned everything that we're going to learn about it? It's a yes or no question.
Yeah,
okay.
no.
So how can you sit there and say that because we don't know yet, it's impossible that we're ever going to figure this problem out?
So what you are using,
we could have sat there and said that about the trip to the moon.
So what you are saying is, yeah. So what you are basically saying is a materialism of the gaps. We don't know, but in the future we will find out, and it will be a naturalistic explanation.
No, I'm criticizing the God of the gaps argument, which is we don't know now, therefore it must have been God.
No, the thing is that we know that factories and blueprints always come from intelligence, and that's exactly what we see in the cell.
No, it's not. It's not even close.
So the DNA is doing what?
It's not. The DNA is, it's doing a lot of stuff. So the reason I say that it's not even close.
What is the main function of DNA? What is the main function of DNA, Snake?
The main function appears to be part of the central dogma, which is that it encodes for proteins. It carries
Exactly. So it does what I said. It is an instructional blueprint to make proteins. It contains instructions.
It's not analogous in any way to any blueprints or instructions that we have today, which are only readable by intelligences. Whereas DNA actually does stuff on its own. It doesn't require any intelligence to do things. It's just a chemical.
What you need is a correct sequence stored in DNA through codons, which code for the sequence of amino acids which make functional proteins. If you don't have the correct sequence, you do not get functional proteins, and you need a minimal number of proteins.
Yeah, you do. Most proteins are functional.
Yes, exactly.
Almost all proteins are functional. They do things.
Yes, but in order to have them functional, you need the right sequence of each protein of the amino acid sequence. And if you don't have the right sequence, you need a correct set of proteins which perform all the necessary requirements to have a self-replicating functional cell. And that is not coming from somewhere. It needs a blueprint or instructional information in the genome, which codifies for the right sequence, making the amino acids, and then these amino acids fold to make the proteins which are required. So you cannot have just any kind of sequence. It has to be the right, correct sequence.
For the ones that you want.
No, not that I want.
We don't know which proteins would be required for the simplest cells. They might not even require proteins at all.
Well, in 2016, a Science magazine has come up with a hypothesis of a minimal cell, and it has about 438 proteins and 470 genes. And if you go lower than that, you do not get a self-replicating cell. So this is, in my understanding, a clear example of irreducible complexity. When you go lower than that threshold which they established, then you don't have a self-replicating functional cell.
Well,
and I would disagree with them, because they said, well, the amino acids, we suppose that they were laying around on the prebiotic earth, and somehow our model cell did import the amino acids and then started to construct proteins. Now, this is just pseudoscientific nonsense.
Well, then you clearly don't understand what a protocell is, because we don't.
Concept of protocell.
Hold on. We don't think that cells just came out of nowhere. They would have came from simpler things that were close to cells, and then they would get closer and closer to actual cells. And by that point,
Okay,
yeah, they would probably have the
let's
ability to
suppose you
create
have
proteins.
Okay, let's suppose you have a functional genome with all the instructions to make a self-replicating functional cell. So you don't have the machinery to transcribe and translate the instructions and the information encoded in the genome. So what? What does that genome do? It doesn't do anything. You need everything together in order to make proteins. Otherwise, nothing is done.
Well, what you need is the ability to protect the RNAs, and you need some kind of ribosome or ribozyme, which is a simpler form, and basically within a membrane. And so as soon as you get that stable, then they can start creating basically mutations of that, and then you'll get we've demonstrated that as soon as you have that, you can get functional ribozymes and functional molecules made out of RNA that can ligate and can join things together and can self-replicate. And as soon as you get that as well, you can get things that can polymerize nucleotides.
Snake, I call you out on this. This is pseudoscientific nonsense, which you are claiming now. I will cite you chemist Wilhelm Huck. He is professor at Redwood University in Belgium. He said a working cell is more than the sum of its parts. A functional cell, a functioning cell, must be entirely correct at once in all its complexity. And then we have how structure arose in the primordial soup from Scientific American. The greatest innovations in existence emerged: the cell, the genetic code, and an energy system to fool it all. All three of these are essential to life as we know it. Yet scientists know disappointingly little about how any of these remarkable biological innovations came about. So they are now confirming precisely irreducible complexity. If you do not have all these three together, then you don't have life.
No, irreducible complexity is a pseudoscientific concept that is not adopted in any of these sources that you have. And so what I was saying is, we don't quite know how we would get to that stable form of a protocell. And what you said was life as we know it. Yeah, abiogenesis does not deal with life as we know it. That's the entire point. So I think you're mixing some of these things together, and what I was saying was, if you have a system that has a stable RNA synthesis and stable RNA enzymes, ribozymes, then we have demonstrated that RNA ribozymes with functional activity, such as reproducing themselves and reproducing other types of RNA and polymerizing nucleotides, we've evolved these. So we know that if we have that sort of protocell, that they can evolve the ability to create proteins.
Graham Kern-Smith said, we can see that at the time of the common ancestor, this system must already have been fixed in its essentials, probably through a critical interdependence of subsystems, roughly speaking, in a domain in which everything has come to depend on everything else. Nothing can be easily changed, and our central biochemistry is very much like that. This is a clear example again of irreducible complexity, and
No, it's not.
I absolutely disagree with you in your claim that irreducible complexity is a wrong concept. Quite in the contrary, I see irreducible complexity all over in biology. If you don't have the essential parts together for the cell, you don't have life. And it's in the extreme. If you don't have just one protein like topoisomerase, you cannot disentangle DNA and you have no life.
Well, the experts don't agree, which is why it's pseudoscience. So yes, the last common ancestor would have been highly derived and would have systems that are interdependent, but that doesn't mean they're not reducible in their complexity.
Following irreducible processes and parts are required to keep cells alive and illustrate Mount Improbable to get life a first go. You need reproduction, metabolism, nutrition, complexity, organization, growth and development, information content, hardware, software, entanglement, permanence and change, sensitivity and regulation. And Paul Davies says, for example, acknowledging the interdependability of the component molecules within a living organism immediately presents us with a stark philosophical puzzle. If everything needs everything else, how did the community of molecules ever arise in the first place? As most large molecules needed for life are produced only by living organisms and are not found outside the cell, how did they come to exist originally? Without the help of meddling scientists? Could we seriously expect a Miller-Urey type of soup to make them all at once, given the hit and miss nature of its chemistry? I think Paul Davies brings it nicely to the point. What you are saying, Snake, is hogwash. I'm sorry to speak clearly, but what you are claiming here with protocells, that kind of stuff, that doesn't work. If you have a self-replicating RNA, it will simply disintegrate and become tar.
And then it'll keep self-replicating, so it keeps making new ones. So it doesn't matter if it disintegrates because it'll keep making new ones.
So where is the evidence?
If given the premise that it self-replicates, it will keep self-replicating. So the original can disintegrate. We don't care because it'll keep making more of itself. That's how life continues. That's exactly how life works. My great-grandparents are now dead, but they self-replicate, and their children keep self-replicating, and their children keep self-replicating, but the original always dies. So I want to go and answer. It's pretty easy to answer how something would appear to be irreducibly complex, where systems are interdependent. And basically, a lot of times what happens is you'll have a structure that is complex that will lose parts of it. And so now if you take away any parts, the whole thing falls apart. But if you add something else to it, then that can stay there and stabilize the whole structure, and you can remove the individual parts. You can look at it like an analogy to a bridge, although they've proven this with biochemicals as well. Whereas you have the two sides of the bridge in the middle of the bridge, and that'll all fall apart if you take away any of them. But you can have a scaffolding over the bridge, and that's how those three parts were put together. But if you take away the scaffolding, then the three parts are interdependent. But if you have the scaffolding on, then none of the parts are interdependent. So that happens a lot with biochemicals.
You are totally believing in what random unguided events can do on a prebiotic Earth.
It's not unguided.
Example, so what is it then?
Chemistry is not unguided. It follows very specific rules.
What rules are that?
The laws of chemistry? Are you familiar?
What kind of law is it? For example, RNA has three parts: a base, a ribose, and phosphate. And the base is always attached to the ribose at the 2' position, and the phosphate is always attached at the 5' position. In all their experiments, they have not been able to repeat experiment where the base has always and in a repetitive manner attached at the 2' position and the phosphate at the 5' position. Actually, the phosphate is very easy to bind also at the 3 or 4' position, and they have not resolved that problem. And to form RNA is a hugely problem. I have listed 27 different problems which science has no explanation how they could have occurred. Even the composition of the bases, which the pyrimidines and the purines, which use nitrogen and carbon, that composition must be just right in order to have Watson-Crick base pairing. And there is no chemical or physical law that says that the composition must be just that. Actually, there are many bases possible. There are actually millions of bases with a different composition possible. So how was that selection process occurring on prebiotic Earth, where just the right composition was selected to have Watson-Crick base pairing?
There's ways to solve for things like homochirality or purity, and the fact that different compositions, racemic mixtures, are created doesn't really, it's not ultimately a problem. We need to know how that happened, but if even within a racemic mixture, you're going to get certain things that are bonding to each other in that way, in the correct way. And so eventually, yeah, we could have had life that has the opposite chirality, but the fact is that if one was basically the first one to achieve any kind of self-replication is going to take over, and it's going to compete with resources for the other ones. So they're just going to die off. It's probably not going to happen. There may have been simple life forms with the opposite chirality, but they would have been outcompeted by the other ones that are further along because they take up all the resources. So, but again, just because we don't know something doesn't mean it was God. That's a logical fallacy.
Well, I apply a sword with two edges argument in regards of intelligent design. The first is that prebiotic synthesis of even the basic building blocks of life has never been demonstrated by scientific experiments to go from just the basic building blocks of life to a self-replicating, fully operational cell. There is a huge gap which is also not solved by science. Cells are, in a literal sense, factories, chemical factories, and I think that if we put the two hypotheses on the table and compare one to each other, where one has absolutely no evidence that it could occur, and on the other side, we have evidence that intelligence can make instructional blueprints and can fabricate complex machines and factories, then I think that the design inference is a far better explanation than unguided evidence on the early Earth.
But it's actually not an explanation at all. You can't explain how God did it. You can't even explain why there's a God. You just assume that if you propose a God, that all those things are solved just by default, but they're not. It raises more questions.
I don't need an explanation of the explanation. Otherwise, I will need an explanation of the explanation of the explanation and so forth, and we will never have an explanation. So we can full stop at the first point. And the first point is that intelligence can do all these things that we are talking about, while random unguided events cannot. Therefore, intelligent design is the better explanation. Now,
it's not an explanation at all.
If how God made and created the universe and life, and why there is a existence rather than not, and why there is a God rather than not, these are enigmas. But because they are enigmas, that doesn't mean that design is not the better inference upon what we see as evidence in the natural world rather than random unguided events.
So it actually is a problem for your side that you can't explain how God did it, and it's a problem that you can't explain how there's a God, how there's an intelligence. You have to account for the intelligence. You just act like it should be a given. And if you're saying that complex things are best explained by an intelligence, well, then that gives you the worst problem, because then you have to have an infinite regress of intelligences creating intelligences. So
no, I don't.
Yes, you do.
But
yes, you can't
no.
just have an intelligence pop out of nowhere. So at some point, you have to allow for something complex to come from something less complex, or else you have an infinite regress. And that's best explained by naturalistic methods that we already know of.
Okay, God is a remarkable simple entity. As a non-physical entity, a mind is not composed of parts, and its salient properties like self-consciousness, rationality, and volition are essential to it. In contrast to the contingent and variegated universe with all its inexplicable quantities and constants, a divine mind is startlingly simple. Certainly, such a mind may have complex ideas. It may be thinking, for example, of the infinitesimal calculus, but the mind itself is not composed of parts. Therefore, it is not complex. So I don't see any problem with that.
It is composed of something because it's doing
A
something.
mind is not
It's
a
not
mind
just.
is not a mind is not composed
Then what is
of
it?
parts.
So
Well, a mind
it
is
can calculate and keep track of everything in the universe, but it's simple and it's not made of anything. You can't explain what it is or where it comes from or why it exists.
Well, first of all, since something cannot come from nothing, something has always been. And since it is not the universe, because the universe had a beginning, then there must have existed something beyond the universe, which brought the universe and physical being into existence. And that being must, by definition, be necessary and uncaused and eternal. And we call it God.
And except you add a lot more to that. You don't, it's not just a necessary thing that caused existence. You think it's a mind, you think that it has a personality. And no, you can't explain why that exists just as much as you can't explain why the universe exists.
I cannot explain
You just
but
think saying God just explains it by default. It doesn't.
well, we have to start at one point. And the thing is that the universe, by all evidence that we have, had a beginning. If it had a beginning, it could not have emerged by nothing. It had to be caused somehow. Since it wasn't a physical thing, otherwise we would have an eternal regress of physical contingent things and beings, then the first cause must be in its essence necessary and eternal and uncaused, and upon which everything physical came to be.
And that's just some hypothetical that you came up with ad hoc to solve the problem of where things came from. So it's you have no idea how to confirm
you may
that.
be,
And you have no idea. You have no idea where it came from.
Okay, maybe you are working based on verificationism or scientism, where everything has to be scientifically proven, but I don't formulate my epistemological framework upon that. To me,
I know, that's the problem.
To me, theology and philosophy is as much an explanation as empirical science.
Yeah, and there's been no philosophers that have proven a God.
It's not necessary.
Otherwise, philosophy would just be Christian, or at least theist.
It is not necessary, Snake, that we prove God. What we need is abductive reasoning and the inference to the best explanation. And the best explanation is that a creator, which is self-existent, eternal, uncaused, caused the universe into being, which is super intelligent, and then made everything that exists, including life and biodiversity.
Real quick before you respond there, Snake, and not to cut you off, a couple of people in the chat were just pointing out that at this point maybe we're venturing a little bit more into the philosophy aspect. Maybe we should try and get back towards, I guess, the science aspect of abiogenesis and intelligent design.
Okay. Well, I think it's important to point out how bankrupt the idea that you can just assert an intelligence and just think that you've solved the issue is, because that's part of the debate.
Well, the thing is, Snake, that we have two possible explanations of the origin of the physical world. One is with the creator, and the second is without the creator. Now, in order to point to creator, we need to understand what intelligence can do, which in contrast, non-intelligence can't do. And we have clear imprints of intelligence in the natural world, and in special in regards of life, where we see instructional information constraining the outcome of matter, which as a result produces molecular machines and production lines and factories and computers and turbines and so forth. So all these things are explained by intelligence, but not by non-intelligence.
It's not just explained by intelligence just because you say the intelligence made it. There's so many holes and problems with that, just as many, if not more, than with abiogenesis. So it's best to stick within things that you can actually demonstrate. And if you don't know, say you don't know. And you already allow for something to exist without a cause. So that could have just been the universe.
Well,
And
first of all, abiogenesis has not been demonstrated. It has not been confirmed. It's actually a total failure. What they tried and thought in the 50s of the last century that somehow in the forthcoming decades the origin of life problem would be solved, rather than coming closer, as you also claim, the problem has demonstrated to be far, far greater than anyone expected it to be. Scientists have not even been able to produce the basic building blocks of life in the laboratory. So it is a total failure. And nonetheless, you have an undeserved hope, which is, in my understanding, a materialism of the gaps, that in the future science will find out how life came to be from non-life. Well, you said that the statistics, they are undeserved and they are not an indicator of truth. I disagree with you. I think that the statistics of having a minimal genome, which provides the information to have the minimal proteome, the odds are so huge. How do you imagine, even if you shuffle an entire ocean for 1 trillion years, you will not have the right composition required to have a minimal proteome. So this is totally,
showed you.
So this is hogwash.
I already showed you how those calculations are complete straw man and have nothing to do with the actual theory.
Well, actually, even if you don't have even the building blocks as RNA to start polymerization, you already fail there.
You also mentioned that the science has failed. You have no way of showing that. That's like saying, no, you haven't. No.
Well,
because you already admitted. Hold on.
Has science?
Hold on. You've been talking
science,
for a while. That's like saying to the guys who invented the airplanes, the Wilbur, I forget the other guy's name, right? The Wright brothers. That's like telling them that they've failed to make an airplane, so they'll never do it. Okay, so we're still learning more things about this subject. So, and you've admitted that we will learn more things because we haven't learned everything that we need to learn. So this entire premise that you keep harping on is just a fallacy in and of itself, and it's an essential part of your argument. So it doesn't make any sense. And I have never said that I hope or that I think that I've demonstrated abiogenesis, but we have demonstrated a lot of it. We've demonstrated that most of the parts of it have a high probability. And there's no reason to stop searching for it. In fact, what you would want to do is for us to just stop trying to figure it out. We do know that it happened. We do know that life appeared on Earth, and on the time scale that is not consistent with young Earth creationism. So either God descended down onto his creation because he couldn't figure out a way to design it in a way that it would come about by itself, and then he meddled around with it. But we do know that it happened. We just don't know exactly how it happened, and we're still learning about it. So I don't see how you can sit there and say it's impossible.
Well, first of all, Snake, you make a lot of assumptions and assertions which are unwarranted. First of all, science has not come even a little bit closer to synthesize, as I said before, the basic building blocks of life, like RNA. And I have a list of 27 problems which are unsolved, and there is no no indication that they will ever solve it.
Again, just because something is unsolved doesn't mean it's impossible to solve. Do you understand that?
What gives you the hope that one day they will find out? For example,
Nothing.
I give you an example.
I don't have hope. I don't have any hope.
Okay, I give you an example. It is supposed that on early Earth there were 500 different amino acids. And of these 500, you have to select 20 amino acids which are used in life. There was no selection process at all extant on the early Earth. And then you had to concentrate these
What do you mean?
amino acids at one construction site. Already there you fail, because there is no selection process on the prebiotic Earth. There is just
What do you mean?
randomness.
What do you mean there's no selection process? There are conditions which will destroy certain molecules, and that's a selection process.
You have 500 amino acids randomly, and they are unpure, they are racemic, they are left-handed, right-handed. They come with all different kinds of configurations, and they are just a bunch of unpure molecules. And you think that a super fantastic miracle, a natural miracle, selected the 20 used in life, and then somehow
No, that's what you
materials-
believe happened. That is literally what you believe happened. That a supernatural miracle put them together.
But I believe that God created life. That's not what I am saying.
That's
I
a
am saying that
supernatural miracle.
Yes, I believe in a supernatural miracle, but a guided miracle by intelligence, because intelligence can make factories and machines and blueprints and everything that we see in biological cells, while randomness cannot.
So first of all, they're not going to have all 500 amino acids floating around together at the same time, so it probably would be restricted to around 20. That seems reasonable. And it could even be less than that. You can still get functional proteins from less than all 26 amino acids. And functional ribozymes, which RNA, the thing about RNA is that it's not as locked in its function as DNA. It can serve as both a basically protein function, it has biochemical function, and it can serve as genetic storage. So you can start getting biochemical functions just from genetic information in the RNA.
Snake, you are again making unwarranted assumptions. I will read
We know
to
that.
you
We
all-
know that those are facts about RNA.
Let me read you all the hurdles and problems that you would have to overcome by natural mechanisms to have functional proteins. In order to have a functional protein, you need to have amino acids. In order to have amino acids used in life, you have to select the right ones amongst the over 500 that occur naturally on Earth. To get functional ones, you need to sort them out between left-handed and right-handed ones, the homochirality problem. Only left-handed amino acids are used in cells. There is no selection process known besides the one used in cells by sophisticated enzymes which produce only left-handed amino acids. Then amino acids used for life have amino groups and carboxyl groups. To form a chain, it is necessary to have the reaction of bifunctional monomers, that is, molecules with two functional groups, so they combine with two others. If a unifunctional monomer with only one functional group reacts with the end of the chain can grow no further at this end. If only a small fraction of unifunctional molecules were present, long polymers could not form. But all prebiotic simulation experiments produce at least 3 times more unifunctional molecules than bifunctional molecules. The useful amino acids would have to be joined and brought together at the same assembly site in enough quantity. There are 4 different ways to bond them together by the side chains. If bonded to the wrong side chains, no deal. The formation of amide bonds without the assistance of enzymes poses a major challenge for theories of the origin of life. Instructional specified complex information is required to get the right amino acid sequence, which is essential to get the functionality in vast sequence space amongst trillions of possible sequences, rare on the ones that are providing function. Then before amino acids would join into a sequence providing functional folding, it would disintegrate and hit by UV radiation. But even if that would not be the case, most proteins become only functional if they are joined in holoenzymes where various amino acid chains come together like lock and key. If that would occur, the tertiary and quaternary structure in most cases would bear no function without the insertion of a cofactor inside the pocket like retinal in the opsin pocket forming rhodopsin. But even if there would emerge a functional protein on the early Earth by itself, it would be like a piston outside of an engine block of an automobile. Many proteins bear only function once they are integrated in an assembly line, producing sophisticated molecular products used in life. But even if we had an assembly line of enzymes producing a functional product, what good would there be for that product if the cell would not know where the product is required in the cell? For example, chlorophyll requires the complex biosynthesis process of 17 enzymes, lined up in the right order, each producing a substrate used by the next enzyme. But chlorophyll has no function unless inserted in the light harvesting antenna complex used in photosynthesis to capture light and funnel it to the reaction center. But
chlorophyll is not part of a biogenic theory. So
okay, but I'm just giving an example because we have production lines also required.
Yeah,
in
so
the
your
cell,
list,
like,
so your list is just mostly, it's not even true, and mostly has nothing to do with the theory at all. So you're gonna have to whittle down those numbers a lot. So when you just say there's 27 of them, that's not true.
No. I was talking about now about amino acids. If you want, I can also list the problems in regards of RNA synthesis, and there are huge problems in regards of that.
Okay, there used to be problems. There still are actually problems for getting rockets to other planets. Yet we figured out some of them. There used to be problems for getting someone on the moon. Guess what? We figured those out. So I don't see what your point is.
Well, the problem that I see in your reasoning, Snake, is that you are making up a lot of assertions, and you put confidence in a materialistic narrative, which has no warrant that it ever will be substantiated. The problems, as I said before, rather than to become smaller, they are increasing.
Except naturalistic methods have been substantiated. No supernaturalistic methods have ever been substantiated, and you admittedly put your whole faith into it. I don't put faith into anything, which is why I require it to be testable and repeatable. And everything I've said so far is the result of an experiment, which is testable and repeatable.
And it hasn't brought the expected results. None of the 4 basic building blocks of life have been synthesized. No, it has not.
None of these experiments are attempting to just throw stuff into a pot and expect a cell to come out. Most of them predict.
That's exactly what you would need. You would have to take a bunch of materials randomly and then just leave it there and look what happens. All these experiments that are made in the lab, they are controlled experiments. They use purified materials, and these materials, they were not existing on the prebiotic Earth. On the prebiotic Earth, you had just a random bunch of material, unpure, racemic, and mixed with all kinds of molecules which are not required in life. And how do you sort them out? There is no mechanism for that.
There are plenty of mechanisms that are natural, which isolate certain compounds and certain chemical series. And so do you know why chemists isolate and purify what they're looking at?
Well, in the case of RNA catalysis on Mont Morolith clay, they had to purify it because the unpurified materials, they don't work. They don't provide the reaction that they were expecting by getting polymerization of RNA.
Yeah, so they're looking at if this can be even close to purified in nature, which there are examples of things that nature will purify mixtures of compounds all the time. So they're just trying to see if the reaction can happen at all, and it can. So and there are experiments.
No, I disagree.
Yes, well, I have with observed science.
Well, I have 2 videos on my channel, Intelligent Design Academy, in regards of prebiotic synthesis of RNA and DNA, and I point out all the problems. And as I explained previously, for example, the right attachment of the base and phosphate on the ribose, that is an unsolved problem. And even to get a non-enzymatic bondage of the 3 elements together, that has not been able to be demonstrated in the laboratory. And I could go on and on and on, and there are so many problems with that snake. So you are basically just making things up. You are asserting things without warrant.
What if I asserted that isn't actually backed up by experiments?
Well, you said that RNA can be made in the laboratory, and that's simply not true.
I didn't say that.
I think you said that.
I said it can be evolved in the laboratory.
Evolved. There was
And
no
it-
evolution on prebiotic Earth.
And yeah, they have polymerized RNA in the lab, and they've created the constituent parts of RNA in the lab.
Well, I have a video on that, and even in 2017, Joyce didn't be able to do it. So I don't know what you're talking about.
Are you talking about them just throwing chemicals in a vat and it all happening in the same experiment?
Well, they actually needed different environments to make the different reactions. So,
Which
that is
exist
also,
on Earth. There are different environments on the Earth, yeah.
well, you need to have the reaction all together at the same environment, the same place, in order to start something.
No, you
cannot-
don't. No, they can be created and then float over somewhere else. So there is an experiment which got pretty close to life and arguably even is life. It's called the
Well, that-
G1.
well-
It's self-replicating. It was all in one step. They just dumped a bunch of chemicals in together. They created proto cells, and it's debatable.
Well,
It's
I don't-
debatable whether they're alive because they don't have any genetic information, but they self-replicate. They appear to have metabolic activity, and they grow. So, and I can list off to you the chemicals that they throw together, but it was all in one step. So, I mean, it's in some ways it's closer than you think. In some ways, yeah, we run into problems, and then sometimes we figure them out, and that's the point of
Okay.
science.
Let me
And
read
so
that.
to
In
say that something is an unsolved problem, that it will never be solved, is just a fallacy.
Well, I will read you. In 2017, English chemist John Sutherland formed nucleotides amongst all of the basic building blocks, lipids for compartments, amino acids for metabolism, starting with cyanide as a common initial substrate. However, this ended up requiring 6 separate bonds with their own unique geochemical conditions and whose products then needed to be mixed together in a specific sequence. Even this degree of complexity did not supply required products, but only precursors. The requirement of so many unique bonds and associated chemistries in such close proximity to each other, of course, stretches plausibility. So they are far, far from even coming close to synthesize RNAs in the lab. So, and if you have RNA, so what? That is like saying we have a brick, and with that brick we make a house. There is such a huge gap between just having an RNA and having a full-fledged, self-replicating biological cell. That's a huge gap, Snake. And you
So
are,
what?
So, yeah. So what? That means
there was once a huge gap. How to get to Mars? You think they just said, well, we don't know. There's a bunch of problems, so it's impossible, and we're just going to give up. You want us to just stop looking for the answer.
And I think it's reasonable because we know the problems, and there is no solution in sight.
There's plenty of solutions that we've come up with for these problems that used to be problems and are no longer problems. So we run into more problems, and we try and figure it out.
So what problem has been solved?
So if
In
we've been doing it for
indeed-
20,000 years and still can't do it, okay, maybe you have sort of a point. And we haven't learned anything for a long time, but we're still learning things all the time. We've only been at it for 70 years? That's nothing.
So what would you consider as evidence that design is a better explanation than random chemical reactions?
If it's only intelligible by an intelligence.
Yes, and how do you recognize what is rather intelligently designed rather than not?
I just said, if there's some kind of information that's only acts upon an intelligence and doesn't act alone in a chemical nature. But that's not what life is.
Yes, but how do you recognize the imprints of intelligent action in contrast to what random action cannot do?
It's not just, I don't know how it happened and it's complex. Those aren't ways to recognize intelligence.
Yes, but how do you recognize the imprints of intelligence?
I just told you. Should I repeat it for a third time? Fourth time,
Yes.
actually?
Yeah, go ahead.
If it's made out of things that can only be understood by an intelligence.
Okay, so I will list you here some things, and then you will tell me if you think these things can come up by random unguided events. An object in nature very similar to human-made things.
It's not random and unguided.
Yes, but I want to know if that is, do you recognize that as something which is rather designed than not designed? If you see in nature an object which is very similar to human-made things, like a factory and blueprints.
Yeah, those don't self-replicate.
Well, as I told you before, Snake, self-replication is the epitome of technology, which we are not coming even close. What do you think? How many companies would build self-replicating machines and factories if that would be technologically possible? We would just go to the beach and then let the factories and machines make everything for us, and we just would entertain life. We don't come even close to make something which self-replicates. So
right, because we can't intelligently design these things. But we can produce them. The fact is that the only way we can produce things with that level of complexity is through trial and through evolution. We produce random sequences and select them for function. That's the only way we've ever been able to create things that are so that are more complex than anything we've designed, is we have to do them without design.
DNA replication, Snake, had to emerge prior to life began. And DNA replication is an extremely complex process. In prokaryotes, you need at least 30 highly specific proteins. In eukaryotes, in human
not relevant to abiogenesis.
You need over 600 proteins. In order for life to kickstart and self-replicate, you need a functional cell cycle. You need cell cycle regulators, and they are also irreducible. If one of these cell cycle regulators is not there and doesn't work, then you do not have an organized, orchestrated cell cycle and replication. And that is one other example of irreducible complexity.
It's not an example of irreducible complexity, and it's not relevant to abiogenesis.
Absolutely, this.
No, it's not. Those aren't the kind of life forms we're looking at with abiogenesis.
So prokaryotes do not have a cycle when they self-replicate?
That's not what we're looking at with abiogenesis. It's not relevant.
Of course it is. You need the
abiogenesis is not supposed to produce prokaryotes. It's supposed to produce much simpler things than that.
Well, as I told you, Snake, in 2016, Science magazine came up with an article of the minimal possible self-replicating living cell. And the threshold below that would not be a living cell. And that cell had 438 proteins and 470 genes. And if you go below that, you do not have life. So that is
you just don't have
transition. That is the transition from non-life to life. That whole concept of protocells is the same thing as to say, is your wife pregnant? And you say, oh, a little bit. Well, that makes no sense.
Yeah,
that makes no sense.
It does. Because this is the problem: is people used to think that sperm was a little baby, literally just a tiny microscopic child in in the shape and form of a child, and it just grew bigger. But we've since learned that it starts off as 2 cells, and it becomes 1 cell, and then it replicates and grows and goes through a huge range of developmental processes. And so there is no point at which you can just point and say, okay, now it's a baby. Well, it's a huge long process that doesn't have clear delineated lines. So it's the same with life. Okay, so you have a membrane. Okay, you have a membrane with self-replicating molecules in it. Is that a cell? Well, I don't know. Is that a protocell? Maybe. And there's a huge range in between that. Whereas, okay, well, now maybe it's just a membrane with RNA in it. Okay, it doesn't even replicate. But then there's self-replicating RNA. And then there's RNAs that have self-replicating functions and other biochemical functions, which maybe will import certain things into the cell. There are a whole range of functions that these RNA molecules could take, and it's just a spectrum. It's not just one point. Okay, this modern type cell is the goal of abiogenesis. No, we're starting at something much simpler and much more gradual steps.
All what I see, Snake, are unwarranted and unsupported pseudoscientific.
That's the theory.
claims.
That's the theory you have to deal with. So sorry.
That's not a theory. That is a hypothesis. Science has come up with over 40 different hypotheses.
You're right. It is a hypothesis. Yeah.
Yeah. And science is coming up every 2 weeks with a different approach, and none of them works.
Hey, gentlemen, I just wanted to jump in here. Oh, I don't want to cut anybody off. We've gone about an extra 50, actually, because the discussion's been so engaging. We've had a large audience tonight with a ton of good super chats and questions. I don't want to just stop you guys right now, but maybe if you guys want to start wrapping up your points and kind of bringing it to a close, if you want to go another couple minutes just to make sure you guys have, feel like you have addressed everything you want to. But yeah, maybe start wrapping it up if that's a good idea with you guys.
Okay, Snake, you can start, and then I will give my end note.
Sorry, I'm just muted because I'm having my bathroom reconstructed. So hopefully you guys haven't heard too much banging. Like right now. Is that too bad? So the main point I want to make is basically the SFT says too much banging. Sorry about that. Okay, back to the point. The main point I want to make is that if you say that there are problems, there are unsolved problems, there are things we don't know about something, therefore it was God, that's a well-known fallacy. And I'm not trying to say that just because we don't know it, we will someday know it. That's also a fallacy. So the best way to do it is to go and just keep trying. And we've solved a lot of problems so far. Why not keep trying? And it fits better to say that, okay, we know that most of this system is self-assembling. We don't know quite how it happened. We know that it did happen. We can see from the record of the Earth that that is exactly what happened, and that things became more complex as they go. We know that the only way to actually produce these things is by unintelligent processes like evolution. So let's try to figure it out. Let's not say, okay, it was this supernatural God that's never been proven, that doesn't hold any water even in philosophy, and that has tons of its own problems that doesn't solve anything. So why not just keep trying to find an empirical answer? That's about it.
Okay, my last comment would be intelligent design theory is a double-edged sword. It wins using eliminative induction based on the fact that its competitors are false. Materialism explains basically nothing consistently in regards to origins, but is based on unwarranted consensus and scientific materialism, a philosophical framework that should never have been applied to historical sciences. evidence should be permitted to lead wherever it is, also eventually to an intelligent agency as the best explanation of origins. And intelligent design wins based on abductive reasoning, using inference to the best explanation, relying on positive evidence on the fact that basically all natural phenomena demonstrate the imprints and signature of intelligent input and setup. We see an unfolding plan, a universe governed by laws that follows mathematical principles, finely adjusted on all levels, from the Big Bang to the Earth to permit life, which is governed by instructional complex information stored in genes and epigenetically, encoding, transmitting, and decoding information used to build, control, and maintain irreducible, complex, and interdependent cell factory parks, and a wide range, millions of species of unimaginably complex multicellular organisms. That's it.
Okay, well, thank you to the both of you. That was almost an hour discussion. It flew by, extremely engaging. I had a blast. I loved it. I got to give a shout out to Brother Smokey as well, because the chat was wild. Ton of super chats, ton of questions, and Smokey, you did a great job.
Appreciate it. Thank you, brother. Absolutely. In fact, all the questions are in both yours and Praise's emails. So if you guys want to pull them up and read them, they're all sitting there and ready for you.
Okay, let's see. Now, Smokey, did you want...
Well, the threshold of RNA self-replication is about 40, a chain of 40 monomers, and that is far-fetched from the minimal of 1.3 million nucleotides that would be required to have a minimal proteome of a free-living, self-replicating bacteria, which I would regard as the threshold from non-life to life.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. So we've seen a little bit of buffering from the chat, but it looks like they say we're back on.
Yeah, no, it looks good on my side.
Looks good now? Okay,
Yeah,
just wanted to make sure we didn't lose the stream. Praise, we're good. We didn't lose the stream. Okay.
It's your fault, buddy.
I'll take the blame. It's always my fault. Okay, so I guess who's the next one? Cocoa Puffer? You can go with that one, Smokey.
Okay, sure. Cocoa Puffer for $5. Thank you so very much. Says the theory of evolution under review for over 150 years, but still taken as true by some. Face slap. No comment.
Snake's mute.
Oh,
Whoops.
Snake, are you muted?
Yeah, I was.
There you go.
Yeah, seems to. Was there a question there, or?
Well, it seems to just be a statement. If you want to
Yeah.
respond to it, that's fine. Do you want me to reread it?
Seems like a dig at evolution. It's one of the most well-established sciences, but that has some of the most predictions behind it, and is basically the foundation of most of biological knowledge at this point.
Okay, thank you for that answer. Otangelo, did you want to add?
Well, I would say that the theory of evolution in regards of common ancestry has been falsified. There are at least 6 points which falsify that hypothesis. And in my understanding, the theory of mutations, natural selection, gene drift, and gene flow has been replaced in recent times upon the evidence through science with pre-programmed instructional information in genetic and epigenetic information and signaling pathways. And these, of course, since they are pre-programmed, must be coming from intelligence. So that's my catch on that.
Well, it seems like begging the question. It had to be pre-programmed, therefore it was pre-programmed. But I think we were planning on doing an evolution debate, so we'll save that for.
We can
later
make a debate on that, and then I can elucidate what my catch is on that.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
Sounds
well, thank you
good.
for your responses, gentlemen. Thank you for that.
Okay, good back and forth there, gentlemen. Once again, I think I think there was the audio issues during our shout out to Stupid Whore Energy. So we'll say it again. Yeah, she's going to allow us all to retire by the end of the year, but it looks like the audio issues have been resolved. Okay, so once again, another one from Stupid Whore Energy, $5 super chat. Thanks so much. Let's see. Pyrimidine, probably butchered that one. Ribonucleotides were synthesized in the lab by Powner AL. Looks like another comment towards you, Otangelo. So go ahead.
Well, of course, that was a directed process. And if you have just the base, you don't have the RNA. So you still have to join them together to the ribose and the phosphate at the right place. You need to know how to join them without enzymes. You need to know how to select the ribose and select the right one rather than the left one. And I could go on. You need the right molecules, you need the right elements, you need nitrogen, you need carbon, you cannot use sulfur or other kind of elements. How was that selected? So, of course, there was an intelligence directing to make these bases, but on the Earth, these elements, they were free existing. And there is another problem. You need actually to fix nitrogen and carbon, and that fixation process requires extremely complex enzymes like nitrogenase and the reductive tricarboxylic acid cycle or the Wood-Ljungdahl cycle. And these all are extremely complex pathway cycles which use proteins and enzymes which were not extant on early Earth. And there is no transition from a clay or metal enzymatic reactions to the enzymatic reactions through these cycles. So these are huge abiogenesis problems which are not solved.
So all of chemistry is directed by chemical reactivity of electrons and their nucleus, and that's all directed by the ways that they interact. There have been nucleotides and amino acids and sugars found in meteorites. So is God creating the parts of life in meteorites? That would be consistent with a God who would be sending these parts down to Earth so that they could self-assemble. Because why would he? I mean, if he can create these things, he would just create them on the Earth and assemble them there. So it's all the evidence seems, even if we assume a God, which Abiogenesis does not prove there is no God at all, it's perfectly consistent with a God who designed a universe that can create life within the rules of the universe itself. And to me, that's a much greater God. That would be a much more maximally intelligent and greater being. But yeah, if you think that nucleotides and amino acids can only be created by intelligences, where are these nucleotide and amino acid filled meteorites coming from?
Well, panspermia is a failed hypothesis because first these meteorites they didn't have purified amino acids in these meteorites. They were all mixed with other products and so forth. They were impure, and they would have burned in the entrance to the atmosphere. So panspermia, that is just hogwash. That is a theory or a hypothesis which doesn't work.
I didn't say it was panspermia. I said that they're in meteorites, which indicates that they are naturally occurring through natural processes. And a God would have no reason to do it.
There have been found amino acids in meteorites, but as I said, first they come in racemic form, in left-handed and right-handed amino acids. They do not come only in left-handed ones. And so what? So you have these amino acids, they would just keep being laying around or incorporated in that meteorite. How would they assemble to polymerize without the enzymatic reactions? That is just fantasy.
We know that too.
Okay, did you want to have a quick last word there, Otangelo, because that was your question, then we'll move on to the next?
No, we can go to the next question. I think I answered it already.
Yeah, of course. I just want to make sure it's fair for both the debaters. Smokey, before you go, I'll give a quick shout out to Stupid Whore Energy, who just gave us a $50 super chat. She says, good job, and she wants more debates. So we'll be working overtime to bring you the best debates and occupy your time, because I enjoy debates just as much as everybody else. So, yeah, thank you so much. That's awesome of you. Smokey, over to
Beautiful.
you, brother.
Yeah.
How is she not broke by now? She's on modern day debate, all these other channels every night. Like what?
Well, maybe Bill Gates in disguise.
Right. It's like we were saying earlier. Our suspicions have been confirmed. She's really Bill Gates.
Bill
Well,
Gates is her sugar daddy.
I think I need to invite her to my channel because I want to see.
Well, maybe the name explains itself.
Well, me and Stupid Horror Energy, we used to bicker back and forth, but no more. I'm staying on her good side.
I think she should get the title of Chat Whale. I don't think I've ever given anyone that title before, but yeah, for sure.
Well, she made a bet. She wanted me to say her full name, because the middle word maybe is a little iffy, but that's a biblical word. It's all over the Bible. So
absolutely,
there you go.
all over the place.
I got no problem saying. I'm looking at 10 different passages that say it right now. So we're laughing. Thanks, Stupid Horror Energy.
Outstanding, awesome. All right, gentlemen. Well, our next question is from the great Jungle Jargon himself. $10 says, Snake, do you know what appealing to infinite possibilities in limited time and space is the same thing as appealing to God, who is infinite in wisdom, understanding, and power?
Do I know that they're the same thing?
Yes, he says, do you know that appealing to infinite possibilities in limited time and space is the same thing as appealing to God, who is infinite in wisdom, understanding, and power?
I don't think it's quite the same thing, but I don't think that I've appealed to infinite possibilities. I'm appealing to a very narrow range of possibilities, which is chemistry. It's not infinite. There's a very limited amount of chemical reactions or ways that chemicals can react. They're very highly defined. So.
Okay. Otangelo, did you want to add anything into that?
No.
Okay, perfect.
I pass.
Okay, gentlemen, and I want to thank the chat again for making these debates so fun, because if it wasn't for you guys, I mean, Smokey, the night's been very lively in the chat. The debaters as well. This has been a lot of fun. So
I've been cracking up the whole time. It's been a blast. You kidding me?
Oh, it's been amazing. We love our chat. As Smokey said, you guys are rock stars and superstars, so you make the channel.
Amen.
Okay, so that was Jungle Jargon. Thanks so much. Now we're on Brother Mitchell, $5 super chat. Thank you so much, Mitchell. For Snake, he's coming at you, Snake. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, which RNA nucleotide evolved first? The A, C, G, or U?
I don't know.
Did you have a response?
Otangelo,
response real quick, brother?
Well, God, of course, made them all at the same time.
Of course.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Otangelo. And Snake, it is your question. You get the last word.
Oh, no, I mean, we don't know which one would have been made first.
Okay, well, thank you, gentlemen.
We know that they were made, though.
Smokey, over to you, brother.
Beautiful. All right, this is from Shreeded for $5. SFT, you're the best, man.
Thanks, Mom. My mom likes to support the channel, so she's in the chat. Just kidding. Shrita, thanks so much, man. You're the best. I appreciate it. Awesome. All the glory to God, so I appreciate that. Let's see. Christian Peasant, thank you so much. We love you. Super chat. Excellent book on Evo, SFT. Well done. Awesome. I promise I did not pay him to say that, so I appreciate that. Or maybe I did. Just kidding.
Only cost you $10 for this.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it.
I'm going to get a refund after that.
Outstanding. And our next question comes from Cocoa Puffer for $5. We don't have God on video either, but we do have eyewitness accounts of supernatural events in a historically accurate explaining how the world began. Historically accurate book explaining how the world began.
There's a lot of historical inaccuracies in the Bible. It's a lot of it's kind of minute details, like I'm gonna have to look up some of it because I don't remember all of it offhand. But there's problems with like the census dates. Like they wouldn't have done it before, like the purge of Herod or something like that. There's a lot of inaccuracies in there, and so the Gospels disagree with each other about what happened. So and there's a lot of books that claim to know what happened at the beginning of time, and I think most people will agree that most of those books are false, but everyone has their pet theory. I just think that they're all false.
Okay, and Tangelo, did you want to add anything there?
Well, I of course believe that the Bible is true, that Genesis is true. This year I have discovered that the Noah's Ark has been, with high certainty or probability, been found on Mount Ararat. I have a topic on that at my library, and I believe that Christ is risen. We have the Shroud of Turin, which is amazing evidence of his resurrection. I think that the four accounts in the Gospels, it's normal that there are small variations because they are eyewitness accounts, and if they would be 100% exactly telling the same, then we would have to ask if they didn't copy one from the other. So I think that the Bible is the true revelation of God. So that's my view on that.
Okay, and
Maybe we should have a debate on the Shroud of Turin. That would be a fun one.
Yeah,
okay.
we can do that. No problem.
And did you say that you found the Ark, or that it's probable that it will be found?
No. It has been found. I can put the link and you can have a look on it. I am friends with Philip Williams, which has been there. And he has videos on his expedition. And I'm just putting it here so you guys can have a look.
Okay, and is that in
Here
private chat there, Otangelo?
Yeah, I just put it. You can. Yeah,
Okay.
just put it. You
All
can
right.
put it to the chat.
I'm going to put that in the
for
public
everyone.
chat right
That's
now for everyone. Oh,
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
George Bond, our number one fan. Thanks so much. Love you.
Amen. Such a beautiful thing. Such a great community we got here, I tell you.
I love our audience, that's for sure.
They're the best. All right, next one is from the Great Jungle Jargon again for $5. Snake, why do you think that multiple independent directed working mechanisms working without mistakes got there by mistakes?
Because it wasn't by mistakes. There are certain chemicals that have chemical functions, and they can interact with each other. And if they change their function, that's not necessarily a mistake. In fact, that's exactly how you can build in complexity, is because they change in function.
Beautiful. Otangelo, any quick word?
Well, chaos doesn't make machines and computers and transistors and factories and factory parks and production lines. That's just illusory. That is giving far too much credence to what randomness can do. That are just products of intelligence.
Okay. And Snake.
Well, I mean, actually, chaos is the way that we've produced the most complex things that humans have ever produced, is by, like, for example, artificial intelligences. It's so complex, we have no idea how it even works. We can't design it, but we can create them through chaos, and just basically saying go at it, create as many permutations as you can.
Yeah, make the same, construct a self-replicating factory.
Did I cut out there?
Through these algorithms. I want to see that.
Sorry, I think I cut out there.
You cut out for only like 2 seconds, so I think he heard the.
Yeah, no, we caught you.
I didn't hear his response, but
okay. So make a self-replicating, highly complex factory through that mechanisms that you suggest. I want to see that.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to figure out. But what I said was that the most complex things that we have produced are produced through chaos.
Well, if the thing is that you want to make a factory with specific goals, then you will employ an engineer's team and not just random accidents.
Well, we do that with a specific goal in mind. We say to computers, this is the goal that we want you to identify something, and then we basically randomize how they basically a part of their code, and we can select for the one that produces the results that we're looking for.
Well, I don't know of any company that does not employ an engineering department to make products specifically for what they want to produce. They have engineers. They do not have the mechanisms that you're suggesting now.
Well, but some of the engineers have to they have to let their work be done for them through the process of evolution, because they can't design it intelligently.
As I said, factories and companies, they employ highly intelligent engineers to produce the products. They do not employ evolutionary algorithms to make the products for them. That is maybe a very narrow and specific employment of evolutionary algorithms to make something specific, but 99.9% of everything that humans manufacture employs highly trained, intelligent engineers and people that know how to do it.
And the most complex things, we can create things that we have no idea how to create, and we can do that with evolution.
Okay, let's get right to the next question. Let's see here. Good back and forth, guys. You're making it fun. This is definitely one to remember. So let's see. Who do we? Oh, looks like Stupid Whore Energy strikes again. Let's see. Ooh, she's coming at you, Otangelo. So let's see. Actually, the simplest cell would have been ribocytes, which has no proteins.
Well, of course, the question is, what is life? And life is not just a ribosome. Life has many different functions, like self-replication, acquiring energy, food, complexity, information storage, adaptation to the environment, and so forth and so forth. There are many things required. It's not just a self-replicating enzyme.
Yeah, I don't think it's black and white. Obviously, there are some self-replicating systems that are not life, but a protocell that is able to have self-replicating genetic material, that's somewhere in between. And then there's going to be stages in between that in-between and life as we know it. So it's not an on-off. There is a spectrum.
Otangelo, it's your question. Did you want the final word there, brother?
No, I leave it by that.
Okay. All right. Beautiful. Next question is, of course, from Stupid Whore Energy again. $5. He says, again, for you, Otangelo, she's really keeping you on your toes tonight. Says, meteorite samples contain amino acids with significant chiral asymmetry.
Well, there are no meteorites with 100% left-handed amino acids. They are all racemic. So you need 100% left-handed amino acids to make functional proteins. So that is not the hypothesis which is working.
Well, if you have significant asymmetry, the likelihood that you're going to get a assembly that is 100% is higher. Or you can have assembly that is mostly that, and it'll still have a function. It'll still fold. It's just going to fold really odd.
Well, there are so many problems with that. First, you have to polymerize them in the right sequence to have a protein. If you have a protein just loose around on prebiotic earth, it has no function. It has only function if it is employed in the right place in the cell or interconnected with other proteins forming production lines. So there are so many problems with that.
Yeah, if you're only going to look at one function, but if you're going to have multiple instances of asymmetric mixtures, then each one might be able to produce a whole host of different polymers or chemicals that have a certain function, and they might have different functions. And so all of this is going to be happening at the same time over millions of years. And so you're going to get a lot of different functions. And so it's not like all of them are going for a specific function.
So this is again just conjecture, Snake. And secondly, if you have 1,300 proteins required to have a bacteria and you don't have helicase to unwind DNA, you don't have life. So just one protein of these 1,300 missing and you have no life. That's why I'm saying that cells
Again,
are
that's-
irreducibly complex.
But that's not abiogenesis.
That's the threshold from non-life to life. You need to have a minimum.
It's not.
That-
That's a modern bacterium.
You can take the one that was supposedly that was suggested by Science Magazine in 2016 with 438 proteins. Then you remove topoisomerase, or you remove ATP synthase, or you remove helicase, and you have no life because these are life essential proteins.
Yeah, I mean, no one's claiming that life can't become dependent on certain systems. Like there's a species of amoeba that previously was not dependent on a type of bacterium that they ingested, but then they ingested this bacterium and it wasn't harmful to them. And basically now they can't live without it inside of them. So you would say that that's irreducibly complex, but we have proof that they can survive without this thing. It's just that they lost systems that they could have used in lieu of these bacteria, but now they are dependent upon the activity of these bacteria. So we know that that kind of thing happens. We know that supposedly irreducibly complex systems can be built up and then they can lose that scaffolding type of thing or that previous dependency, and they can switch dependencies.
Okay, let's, I guess since that was Otangelo's question, do you want to have a quick final word there, and then we'll move on to the next?
Well, I go even to say that DNA is irreducibly complex because it is constituted by 3 parts, which are essential: the base, the ribose, and the phosphate. If you don't have one of these 3 elements, you do not have a functional RNA. So it goes down to that level.
Okay, so let's see. Next one here, and good back and forth as always, gentlemen. Been a lot of fun. We got Christian Peasant again. Thanks so much. He says, Otangelo, you have the patience of a saint. Oh, those are fighting words. What do you got to say to that, Snake?
Well, I mean, I've not to toot my own horn, but I've gotten comments like that before. So yeah, I think Otangelo is pretty patient, and I enjoyed this conversation. He's pleasant to talk to.
Awesome. I think it's been a very respectful, cordial discussion. I think you both have done a great job, so I appreciate it. Those are always the best kind of debate. So, Smokey, over to you, brother.
Beautiful. Thank you, brother. All right. Next one, of course, again by Stupid Whore Energy for $5. Transfer of genetic information does not depend the ribose phosphate backbone. See Eschenmoser. I probably butchered that.
Don't worry, I've butchered lots of words in her.
Well, they always have very complex last names, don't they?
They do. Otangelo, I think that might be for you.
I didn't understand the question.
It says transfer of genetic information does not depend on the ribose phosphate backbone.
That's new to me.
Okay.
I'll post it in the side chat if you want to save it, Otangelo, for something to look at.
There are other molecules. One is called tapas that they're looking at that could be intermediates between genetic information or could they basically code for genetic information and can serve as a template or a scaffold for genetic information. So they're looking into that as well.
Well, of course, there is not just genetic information. In the cell, there are 23 at least epigenetic code systems, and they all transmit information. And there are the signaling pathways, which also encode, transmit, and decode information. So the cell has a variety of different information systems.
Okay, let's go to the next one. Let's see. Sigifredo Sarabia, thank you so much. $10 super chat. I enjoy saying that name. It's catchy. So let's see. Question is for Otangelo. So this is good. We've had a good mix of questions and comments for both Otangelo and Snake. And sometimes people have a little fun with the super chat. So I appreciate you guys being a good sport over them. Let's see. So can you provide or describe scientific mechanisms how God created different life forms each day of the week without them popping into existence? Can you avoid scientific terms like the word?
Well, we don't know how the interface mind-body works, and we don't know how a mind can interact and provoke change in the physical world. That is a mystery. So I don't have an answer to that. What we know is that the mind interacts with the brain, and the brain sends signals to our body, and then that provokes physical change. But how that interface brain-mind works, I don't think there is an explanation to that.
Well, if the mind or a soul can interact with the brain, why can't God just design something where the mind can just directly interact with the body, like a puppet? Why does he need to have a brain, so something that controls the brain, which controls the body? Why not just eliminate the middleman?
Now, in regards of God, I think he didn't use a physical body to create things. He did it through his spiritual power.
Which you have no demonstration of or idea how it works?
No.
Okay. That's why I think it brings up more questions than it actually explains.
Well, as I said before, Snake, we can elucidate what intelligence can do, which random unguided events can't do. And then we can look into the natural world and see if we see the signature of intelligent action in the past. And I think we see that all over.
Well, I don't know why you guys keep repeating it's very typical, random and unguided. It's not unguided at all. But from what we do know, the most complex things that humans have created are not produced by intelligence. They're actually produced by non-intelligent processes.
Again, I do not see any example where non-intelligent processes produced both a blueprint, instructional, codified, complex information, and upon that instruction, producing machines, production lines, computers, transistors, complex factories, and factory parks. This is something that I have only seen intelligence can do. And this is what we see in the cell, as I explained previously. We see the genome as the instructional blueprint and information, and then the molecular machines and production lines and the cell factory as the product of the genome and epigenetic information. So we have the two components there, and they require an explanation. And in my understanding, there is only one reasonable explanation, and that is intelligent action.
Yeah, I mean, you can't imagine another explanation. So it's the one that you think it is, but that's just an argument from ignorance, and it's a fallacy. So it's not very convincing to me.
No, it's not an argument from ignorance. It's an argument from experience. We have experienced that intelligence can all produce all those things, and we have experienced that non-intelligence has never produced all those things. So there is a clear distinction here, and I go where the evidence leads to.
Well, we haven't produced self-replicating life yet, and so neither of those actually we have experience with producing, but we have a record of it arising on the Earth over a long time scale.
Okay, let's give who. Oh, this was for you,
Otangelo's, yeah.
Okay, so you can have the last word, and we'll move on to the next.
No, we can go to the next.
Go ahead.
Why
Smokey.
don't you, why don't you go ahead and take that one too, SFT, and then I have a few more super chat ones that kind of snuck in towards the tail end that weren't in that, so I'll read those if you want to take
Beautiful,
that.
beautiful. We'll have a speed round. I like that
There
idea.
you
Okay, so our favorite stupid horror energy $5 super chat. Thank you so much. Mycoplasma myosoids is only the simplest organism found. It doesn't represent a threshold of any sort.
I agree with that. I think that Mycoplasma, since it is a pathogen and it is requiring a host in order to live, and it is it gets nutrition from the host, that is not a good example of an eventual first primordial cell that as a last universal common ancestor, or even a first universal common ancestor. That would require to be a free living cell which can produce all the basic building blocks like amino acids by itself. And the evidence of the smallest bacteria being able to do that has not only 500,000 nucleotides, but 1.3 million nucleotides and about 1,300 proteins, and a fully developed metabolic network. So that is, in my understanding, an exemplification of what has to be reproduced to have a life in its its smallest form.
Okay, unless you had a really, really quick response, Snake, maybe we should speed round the next few.
Yeah, I mean, I've probably said it before, where all you basically need is a stable RNA reproducer or replicase, and then you can start to get different mutated RNAs, and you can start to build in complexity from there. And so that's really the simplest. That's kind of more closer to the threshold.
All right.
Yeah,
Okay,
we should see that in viruses, which but they are not evolving to become free living. They are always depending on bacteria, on a host.
Okay, if you want to go ahead there, Brother Smokey.
Sure. Yeah, let's try to move through these. These are three more that snuck in towards the end. We have one from Sigifredo Sarabia. Thank you so much. Your $5 says, did that cell create different kinds? If yes, how is that not evolution? If no, is Bible wrong in that we don't see one quote unquote kind?
I think that the common ancestry claim by science is hogwash. There is no evidence for that. And life had to start with all the biodiversity, and special with microorganisms, because we need energy cycles like the nitrogen cycle, the carbon cycle, the sulfur cycle, the heavy metal cycle. And all these cycles, they require an interdependence of different bacteria with different kind of metabolisms. Some like cyanobacteria, they use nitrogenase enzymes to transform nitrogen into ammonia, which is essential for the basic building blocks of life. They have different kinds of metabolism networks, and they work in a synergetic manner together. And that, in my understanding, had to start all fully developed and extant from day one. Otherwise, you would not have these energy cycles, and you would not have the elements required for building the building blocks of life.
Okay. Thank you for that. And our next one is going to be towards Snake, coming from Nephilim Free, coming at you, Snake, for $5. Says the origin of life field is a failure. Quote from Eugene Koonin, microbiologist at the National Center for Biotechnology Information, 2011.
Yeah, I know Nephi loves his quote mines. Yeah, we have failed to create a life form purely through basic prebiotic chemistry, and that really doesn't mean anything. That just means that we need to keep trying. All scientific achievements have had a long string of failures before it succeeded, and I see no reason to stop trying. And yeah, I think that the fossil record clearly shows that this event did happen. We're failing to figure out how it happened or we failed to sufficiently explain it. It's not that we're failing to figure it out. We've failed to explain it so far, but we are figuring it out.
Okay. Very good. And the last one there is going to be for you, Snake, again. And this is coming from Alec Cox for $15. Thank you so much, Alec. Thank you for that super chat. It says, Snake, what did the Nagasaki nuclear bomb create out of all that chaos?
That's not the kind of chaos that I'm talking about, but we could go a lot into the socio-political ramifications. But I take his point that it's just a destructive chaos, and there's a lot of destructive chaos in the early Earth, but then that basically would provide the selection mechanism. Whatever survives that destructive chaos is going to be selected for.
Okay. All right. Now, there was one that came in, and that's the end of the super chats. But there was one normal question, and I would like to read it because it came in at the very, very, very beginning. And because he was right up front, I figure I probably should. It's from your good buddy, Tony, Anthony Maurice. And he says, RNA world experiments involve a long series of highly orchestrated steps, which include purifying desired products, removing unwanted byproducts, changing physical and chemical conditions. Your response?
Yeah, it's hard to tell what happens if you don't purify your samples. I mean, if he's ever been in a lab and worked with chemicals, you know that we do this for all types of chemicals. We don't just work around in the mud because we can't really tell what's going on. So we isolate and we purify and isolate our variables so we know what's happening. And we try and prove a certain reaction is possible. And then there are other less convoluted experiments where, we throw them into into a vat and see what happens. And those have also yielded interesting results.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, thank you for that response.
I seen in the chat, Brother Mitchell said that he had a super chat. Did we get to his? Let me see.
Did we miss one?
Let me see if I might have saved one more. Mitchell, I'm just
Was it the one that said which RNA nucleotide evolved first, A, C, G, or U? We did ask that one.
We did ask that one. That's right. Brother Mitchell, if you have a chance in the chat, maybe confirm if that's the one. And I can go on to another just regular question here if you'd like to. Let me see. What would be the next one?
The next one is MMP. I read Anthony's first one, so it's the next one down there.
Okay. Great job. Wow, it's been a great debate. So this one is from MP Reziv. I'll just read it word for word. Why does Snake field in title to yes or no answer, but he beats around every bush? I just read that word for word. Snake, how would you can respond?
Not sure what bushes he's talking about, but if someone pushes me for a yes or no answer, then I'll answer.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for that. Well, let's jump to, let's see, faithful, honest, and true. And then Brother Smokey, if you want to do the next two after that.
Sure, go right ahead, brother.
Awesome, thanks. So let's see. Thanks for the question there, Faithful. Question for a Snake. He asks, if an RNA virus was first, then how did it survive without a host?
Well, I think maybe it might be virus-like, but the host, you could have the self-replicating packages of RNA. Viruses have a protein coating, but you might have something like a virus that floats between membranes, something like that. And and it could interact with other systems that might have different RNA functions than the ones it originated from.
Okay, beautiful. All right, question from Chris Keith. Says, ask Snake, if he knows DNA is inert and cannot do Jack Johnson in respect to replication without a cell, DNA is simply information/instructions.
Can you repeat that? Because you cut out the first part.
Yeah, ask Snake if he knows DNA is inert and cannot do Jack Johnson.
It happened again. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't hear what happened before Jack Johnson.
Okay. He says, ask Snake if he knows DNA is inert and cannot do Jack Johnson in respect to replication without a cell. DNA is simply information/instructions.
Well
Yeah.
spoken.
Okay, I got it that time. Yeah, that's why RNA world and RNA studies are a lot more important, because we know DNA is pretty much the only function it has is as storage medium. It has a couple other functions, but of course, because it is a chemical, it's not just information on a computer. But our DNA has the ability to have a phenotype and a genotype, so it does have a lot more biochemical activity than DNA does, and that's why RNAs can be evolved to produce all kinds of functions that are useful for early cells.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you. Now, there is one more statement that I'm going to save to the very end, because that'll be something for Otangelo to take probably to his channel. But we have one more question here, and this is from Basement Dweller. It says, for Snake, does he realize that all his arguments confirm that our universe is fine-tuned for life? Is this perhaps why small steps showing life can exist can be shown in a lab?
All experiments are fine-tuned for life, did he say?
Does he realize that all his arguments confirm that our universe is fine-tuned for life?
I don't. Most of the universe is extremely hostile to life, and most of the Earth is hostile to life, and most of the laboratory is hostile to life. At least most life. So I'm not really sure I get the question.
Okay. Very good. Thank you for that. And but this one, Otangelo, this is going to be for you. You might want to take this one and maybe offer this person to come to your channel. They say to Otangelo, pull up a DNA formula and tell me your problem with it. I think that sounds like something you could probably have a show about.
A DNA formula, what does he mean by that?
I'm not sure, but maybe he would like to come to your channel and pitch that at you.
Well,
And that's Lucas. So we've had him on before, so he probably would be up for that.
There you go.
And one final question just came in from Jack Johnson.
Like, really?
Turns out Jack Johnson's in the chat.
Like, if you say his name 3 times, does he show up?
Yeah.
That's what I was doing. I made you do it.
Like Candyman. Oh, that's funny. Well, I guess that's it for the questions. So great job, Smokey. We had an amazing chat. Shout out to the debaters. I mean, thanks so much for giving us your time. You guys went at it for like 2.5 hours. So without you giving us all that time, we would not have been able to make this debate happen. It was definitely one to remember. So once again, thanks to the live chat. Lots of awesome questions. Awesome super chat. Smokey, thanks so much for helping me out tonight, man. I mean, this is such a blessing. So I'm going to hand it off to the debaters to give some final words. If they want to plug in their channels or whatever you guys want to say, go ahead. So thanks for being here. Snake, you can take it away.
Yeah, go. Snake was right. You can find me on Twitter too. That's I guess you can find me through Snake Was Right or Reasonable Doubter. And I produce all kinds of content. So your crowd would probably like my more political ended stuff, and but I also make atheist content. So yeah, just head over there. I pretty much just do whatever I feel like at the moment. So
awesome. Well, thanks again for being on the show, Snake. You always make for a good, lively debate. Otangelo, thank you as well. Any final words from you?
Yes, thank you for having me at your channel. As you linked already, I have a new channel on YouTube. Its name is The God Talk. So please visit, subscribe, and if there are some atheists or the others which would like to have a chat with me or debate or discuss anything, then you're welcome. And there is another channel which I have on YouTube. The name is Intelligent Design Academy. Please visit also, have a look at my videos up there. And basically that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Otangelo. You guys made for a really good debate. Brother Smokey, do you have any final words? It looks like you might have an open mic night tonight. If I'm correct.
Yeah. Thank you for letting me say that. Yeah, in fact, in about 20 minutes or so, just need to freshen myself up, get myself a beverage, and we're going to kick off a open mic show. So everyone can come in, give their thoughts on this debate or other debates or random topics, but come in, have a chat, have fun, enjoy the entertainment. It's always a live wire show. So yeah, come on over.
Beautiful. Looks like I'm pulling another all-nighter. So here we go. The party begins.
Hey man, at least you'll have fun.
Who needs sleep these days? Thank
Right?
God for coffee.
The Warriors, man. We can sleep when we're dead.
There you go. We'll sleep enough when we're dead.
There you go, man.
Awesome way to end the stream. Brother Praise, the behind-the-scenes amazing producer of ours. Any final words before you shut her down for the night?
No, it was just a great debate, good discussion. Maybe we can do it again. And yeah, just going to leave it there. I say